I notice there's no Ein Pantan Goy Dax text file attached, only the transcript, comment analysis, transcript analysis, and thumbnail image were uploaded. I'll proceed with creating completely new character names that feel fresh and natural for the story. If you do have that names list, share it and I can double-check against it. 1 second, I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing out my coffee mug, watching the bird feeder swing in the October wind. The next second, the floor came up to meet me so fast I didn't even have time to put my hands out. My left hip hit the tile with a crack I felt more than heard, and then there was just the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator, and pain so bright it turned my vision white at the edges. I lay there for a while. I don't know how long enough for the coffee I'd made to go cold on the counter, long enough for the birds outside to come and go twice. I kept thinking someone would come. That's the thing nobody tells you about living alone, that in the worst moments some part of your brain still expects someone to walk through the door. Nobody came. I finally dragged myself to where I'd left my phone on the coffee table. It took me 11 minutes, I know, because I watched the clock on the microwave the whole way just to give my mind something to hold on to other than the pain. I called 911. I gave them my address. I told the woman on the line I thought I'd broken my hip. She asked if I had anyone she could call, and I gave her my daughter's number without even thinking. It was just the automatic thing, the thing you do. Her name is Vanessa. She's 38 years old. She lives 45 minutes away in a townhouse her father and I helped her buy when she got divorced 6 years ago. We gave her the down payment, $60,000, because that's what you do for your child when they're struggling. You don't think about it, you just do it. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. They were kind. One of them, a young man with red hair, held my hand while they got me onto the stretcher and told me I was doing great, which was obviously not true, but was exactly the right thing to say. They took me to St. Catherine's Regional. I had emergency surgery for a fractured left hip the following morning. Vanessa did not answer when the hospital called. They called her 43 times over 14 hours. 43. I know this because my nurse, a woman named Gloria, who wore daisy print scrubs and had the energy of someone who had seen everything and remained unimpressed by all of it, told me so after I came out of recovery. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you say something you think the other person already knows. We tried your daughter quite a few times, she said. 43, actually. We stopped trying around 2 in the morning. I remember looking at the IV in my arm and thinking, 43 times. Someone sat at a nursing station and dialed my daughter's number 43 times, and 43 times she did not pick up. I didn't cry. I was too tired and too medicated to cry. I just nodded like it was information about someone else's life, and Gloria squeezed my arm and went to check on the patient in the next room. My neighbor Deirdre was the one who showed up. Deirdre is 71, 2 years older than me, and she has bad knees and drives like she's personally at war with every other vehicle on the road. She found out what happened because she saw the ambulance from her kitchen window and called the hospital herself until someone told her where I was. She drove 40 minutes in morning rush hour and was sitting in the chair beside my bed with a container of homemade soup she'd somehow had time to make when I woke up the second time. I started crying then. Not about my hip, about Deirdre and her bad knees and her terrible driving and the soup. She patted my hand and said, "Don't you dare thank me," so I didn't. Vanessa called on the second day. I was doing my first attempt at standing with the physical therapist when my phone buzzed on the tray table. I saw her name and let it go to voicemail, partly because I was in the middle of something, mostly because I needed a few more minutes before I heard her voice. Her message was 40 seconds long. She said she was so sorry she hadn't heard her phone. She'd been in Savannah for a long weekend with some girlfriends, and the hotel had spotty service, and she'd had her phone on Do Not Disturb mode, and she just felt awful, just absolutely terrible, and she would be there as soon as she could. I played it twice. Then I opened Instagram, which I use mostly to look at pictures of other people's gardens and occasionally post photos of my own roses. I typed Vanessa's name into the search bar. Her account is public. It has always been public. She's never thought to wonder whether I might look at it. She'd posted 11 times over the weekend. 11. There was a photo of her and two friends at a rooftop bar Saturday night, 8:47 p.m., 2 hours after the hospital made its first call to her number. There were photos at brunch, photos at a plantation tour, a video of the three of them laughing in what looked like a hotel pool, her phone clearly working perfectly fine, the upload timestamp reading Sunday afternoon. The last one was a reel, 30 seconds. Her holding a cocktail, grinning at the camera, the low-country sunset going gold and pink behind her. The caption said, "Sometimes you just need to turn off the noise and live your life. No guilt, just joy." I sat with my broken hip in a hospital bed and I read that caption 4 times. No guilt, just joy. My mother used to say that the truth about a person comes out in the moment they think no one is watching. I'd always thought that was a little dramatic. I understand it now. I didn't call Vanessa back that day, or the next. She arrived at the hospital on the 3rd morning with a vase of grocery store flowers and a guilty expression she was clearly hoping would be enough. She came in talking, the way she does when she's nervous, talking about the drive, the parking, the traffic on the bridge, and she kissed me on the forehead and set the flowers on the windowsill, and then finally looked at me, really looked at me, and seemed to register that I was not going to make this easy. "Mom," she said. "Sit down," I said. She sat. I asked her to tell me again about the spotty service. She did. I asked her to explain the hotel's Wi-Fi situation. She explained. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which I think scared her more than anything else could have. Then I turned my phone around and showed her the Instagram grid. She went very still. I didn't yell. I want to be clear about that. I am 69 years old and I have earned the right to not yell. I told her what I knew, that the hospital had called her 43 times, that Deirdre had driven 40 minutes on bad knees to be with me because my own daughter could not be reached, that I'd been on the kitchen floor for 38 minutes before I could get to my phone, and that in those 38 minutes, the only thing I'd wanted in the world was to hear her voice, and she had been posting sunset reels with the caption, "No guilt, just joy." Vanessa cried. Genuinely, I think. She said she didn't know it was that serious. She said she thought if it were really an emergency, someone would have found a way to reach her. She said she was sorry, over and over, and the way people say sorry when they're hoping the word itself will be enough to close the subject. I told her I needed some time to think. She left with the same flowers she brought in. I don't know why. I think she just needed something to carry. I spent the next 3 days thinking. That's one thing a hospital stay gives you, time to think, with very little to interrupt it. I thought about the $60,000. I thought about the years I'd driven Vanessa to school and waited up for her and talked her through breakups and job losses and the divorce that broke her heart, and then quietly, steadily bored me half to death because she needed to retell every detail of it for 2.5 years. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I made that she came to when it was convenient and skipped when it wasn't. I thought about the trip to Italy I'd planned for my 68th birthday, which I cancelled because Vanessa said she might need me that month. And then she didn't, as it turned out. She just wanted to keep her options open. I thought about my house. My house is a 1960s craftsman in a neighborhood that has gotten considerably more desirable in the 20 years since my husband Gerald and I bought it. Gerald died 4 years ago. A heart attack, very sudden, the kind that doesn't give you time to say anything. Since then, it's just been me and the house and the garden and Deirdre across the street. The house is worth, at current market, somewhere in the neighborhood of $580,000. I own it outright. Gerald and I paid it off 11 years ago and threw a small party to celebrate. Vanessa has mentioned the house regularly over the past 2 years, mentioned what the neighborhood is doing, mentioned that a place like this would be a lot to manage alone, mentioned twice that it might make more sense for me to move into something smaller and free up the equity. Both times I said I wasn't ready. Both times she dropped it within a few days. I had not let myself fully understand what those conversations meant about how she saw me. I understood now. I called my attorney from the hospital room. Her name is Patricia. No, I'm joking. Her name is Roberta. Roberta Chen. She's been my attorney for 16 years, and she has a gift for delivering difficult information in a tone of such perfect professional neutrality that you almost feel calm receiving it. I told her I wanted to talk about my estate documents. She said she could come to the hospital or we could wait until I was home. I said I'd rather not wait. She came the following afternoon. We talked for an hour and a half. I want to be honest about what that conversation felt like. It didn't feel good. It felt necessary, which is a different thing. I am not a vindictive person by nature. I have never particularly enjoyed confrontation or punishment, or the idea of making someone suffer. But I had spent 4 days in a hospital bed, thinking about 43 unanswered calls, and I had come to understand something clearly. What I did with my assets was the one area of my life where I still had complete and total control, and I was going to use that control thoughtfully. I had a will. It was 7 years old. It left nearly everything to Vanessa. I rewrote it. I won't go through every detail, because some things belong to me. But I'll say this, I set aside a specific amount for Vanessa, enough to be meaningful, not enough to be life-changing, and I directed the majority of the estate toward 3 places: a literacy foundation that teaches adults to read, the animal shelter 2 towns over where I got my cat Leonard, and a scholarship fund at the community college in my county, specifically for women over 50 returning to school. Gerald would have approved of all 3. He was, at his core, a man who believed that money should move toward people who were trying. Roberta drafted the documents. I signed them. She left. I lay back against the hospital pillow and felt, for the first time in days, like myself. I came home on a Tuesday. Deirdre had stocked my refrigerator. She'd also, without asking, arranged for a home health aide to come 3 mornings a week, a woman named Sylvia who turned out to have extremely strong opinions about daytime television and became, over the following 6 weeks, one of the more entertaining presences in my life. Vanessa called twice a week while I was recovering. Polite calls, checking-in calls, the kind of calls you make when you know you're in trouble and you're trying to demonstrate effort. I took every call. I was civil. I was warm, even in a careful way. I was not going to be the mother who shut her daughter out completely. That's not who I am. And I wasn't going to become her now. But I also wasn't going to pretend that nothing had happened, that the version of me who gave away $60,000 without a second thought, who cancelled Italy, who waited and hoped and excused, that version of me was still available. She wasn't. Something had broken in that fall, and I don't mean my hip. I put the house on the market in early December. I want to explain this decision because I think it's easy to misread. I wasn't doing it to punish Vanessa. I was doing it because I had spent 3 weeks lying in bed in a house I could not fully navigate on my own, staring at a staircase I couldn't climb, thinking about 38 minutes alone on a kitchen floor. The house I loved was no longer safe for the life I was actually living. That was a painful thing to accept. I accepted it. I found a 1-level condominium in a community about 20 minutes from where I'd lived, 55 and older, which I had previously regarded as a concept for other people. It has a garden plot I can tend in the warmer months, a community room where they play cards on Thursday evenings, and a very good view of a small pond where an aggressively territorial goose named, I'm told, Gerald, I could not make this up, has lived for 6 years. I signed the purchase agreement in January. I told Vanessa about the house sale the same week I listed it. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "You're selling the house." I said yes. She asked why. I told her all of it. The safety concerns, the stairs, the fact that I'd made a decision about my own life based on my own needs for the first time in longer than I could clearly remember. She was quiet again. Then, what happens to... And she stopped herself. And I think in that stopping, she heard herself, heard what she'd been about to ask, and had the decency to feel ashamed. "The estate is handled, Vanessa," I said. "You don't need to worry about it." Another silence. "Mum," she said, "I really am sorry. About the hospital, about everything. I've been thinking about it every day." "I know," I said. "Are we okay?" I thought about what okay means between a mother and a daughter after something like this. I thought about how long I had been arranging myself around her needs and calling it love. I thought about Deirdre and her bad knees and the soup. I thought about Gerald, who would have said something sensible and probably funny, and would have known exactly what the right answer was. "We're working on it," I said, and I meant it, both parts of it, that we weren't okay yet and that I was still willing to try. She said thank you. I said good night. I hung up and sat in my living room. The living room with the wooden floors Gerald and I refinished ourselves in 1998. The fireplace we fought good-naturedly about the mantel style for 6 weeks before finally choosing the one I wanted, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief of it, because it is grief. Losing the version of your child you believed in is a kind of grief. You don't get to bury it or mark it or have people bring you casseroles about it. You just carry it and keep going. I moved in March. Deirdre cried when I drove away. I told her she was still 40 minutes away and that I expected her there for Thanksgiving, and she told me to stop being ridiculous, and then cried harder. Sylvia helped me pack the kitchen and gave me a crystal ornament she said was for good luck in new spaces. I hung it in the window of my new living room, and it throws little rainbows across the floor in the afternoon when the sun hits it right. Vanessa helped me move. She came with her truck and her muscle and her guilt, and she worked harder than I'd seen her work in years. We didn't talk much that day. We didn't need to. There's something almost peaceful about physical work when you don't know what to say to each other. You just carry boxes. You just move things from one place to another. You just try. We had dinner that evening at a Thai place near my new building. She ordered pad see ew and I had the green curry, and we talked about nothing very much. Her job, a show we'd both been watching, The Goose Gerald, and it was almost normal. Not the before normal, a different normal. A different normal. Quieter, more careful, honest in a way that our relationship, I'm realizing, maybe never fully was. She hasn't asked about the estate again. I swim 3 mornings a week in the community pool. I'm working through a reading list I started when Gerald died and then abandoned because grief made it hard to concentrate. I've gotten through 6 books in 4 months, which is not remarkable but feels like one. My hip aches when it rains, which the physical therapist said would probably be the case for the rest of my life. I've decided to think of it as a weather forecasting system. I've also started a small raised garden on my plot. Nothing ambitious. Tomatoes, herbs, a row of the yellow marigolds I've grown every summer for 20 years because Gerald always said they kept the pests away, and I've never had the heart to stop planting them. The goose Gerald has expressed strong opinions about the marigolds. We've reached an understanding. People ask me sometimes, people my age, women who've had their own versions of this, whether I regret it. The will, the house, the decisions that couldn't be undone, whether I think I was too hard, whether I should have forgiven more completely. I always think about that for a moment before I answer. Not because I'm uncertain, but because I want to be accurate. I don't regret protecting myself. I spent too many years believing that was the same thing as being selfish, and those two things are not the same, not even close. I do grieve. I grieve the mother-daughter relationship I pictured and never quite had. I grieve the ease of it, the uncomplicated version where love is simple and consistent and doesn't require anyone to be brave. I grieve Gerald, still, always, because he would have known what to say, and I'm still figuring it out without him. But I am 69 years old. I live in a clean, well-lit space where I can move without fear of falling on stairs. I have a neighbor named Deirdre who drives like a hazard but brings soup. I have a physical therapist named Marcus who tells bad jokes every Tuesday and Thursday and has gotten my hip to about 90% of what it was. I have a goose who hates my marigolds and a pond that goes silver in the evening light and 6 good books still ahead of me on my list. I have, for the first time in a long time, a life I chose. If you are listening to this and some part of it sounds familiar, not the details maybe, but the shape of it, I want you to hear this one thing. The love you give should not leave you alone on the floor. That's it. That's the whole thing. The love you give should not leave you alone on the floor. You are allowed to notice when it does. You are allowed to do something about it. You are allowed to take up space in your own life. It is not too late to start. I've had a lot of time to think about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any grand philosophical way, just the ordinary kitchen table kind of thinking you do when you're recovering slowly and the days are quiet and your hip aches every time the weather shifts. Here is what I keep coming back to. Nothing that happened was actually a surprise. That's the part that sits with me. Vanessa didn't become someone who posts vacation reels while her mother is in surgery overnight. She'd been becoming that person for years. In smaller ways, I kept finding reasons to overlook. Every cancelled Sunday dinner. Every time she took the money and didn't say thank you, not really. Every time I shrunk a need of mine down to nothing so she wouldn't have to feel inconvenienced by it. I participated in all of it. I kept the door open. I told myself that was love. What I've learned, and I mean learned the hard way, the way that leaves a mark, is that love without honesty isn't kindness. It's avoidance, dressed up to look like kindness. Every time I made an excuse for Vanessa instead of telling her the truth, I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting myself from the discomfort of saying something hard. And in doing that, I robbed her of the chance to actually grow. That's on me too. I own that. The 43 calls are what cracked it open. There's something about a number that's specific that you can't explain away. Not 30, not a handful, 43. Someone sat at a hospital nursing station and tried to reach my daughter 43 times while I was in surgery, and she was in Savannah posting sunsets. When I saw those photos, something in me went very quiet and very clear. Not angry exactly. More like, I finally see this accurately. And once you see something accurately, you can't choose to unsee it just because the truth is inconvenient. Changing the will wasn't revenge. I want to be precise about that. It was the first financial decision I had made in years that was based entirely on my own values instead of my fear of Vanessa's disappointment. That's what it felt like. Not power, just clarity. Directing that money toward the Literacy Foundation, the shelter, the scholarship fund. Those felt like choices Gerald would have recognized as mine. As us, actually. We were people who believed in giving things to people who were trying. Selling the house was harder. That house held Gerald. It held 30 years of a life I loved. But I had been alone on that kitchen floor for 38 minutes, and I had lain in a hospital bed for days, unable to climb stairs. And at some point, the love of a place has to yield to the truth of what your life actually is now. Keeping the house would have been staying in a past that no longer fit, moving into that condo, with the pond and the terrible goose and Sylvia's opinions about daytime television. That was choosing the life in front of me instead of the one behind me, instead of the one behind me. That took more courage than the will did, honestly. Vanessa and I are still figuring it out. I'm not going to wrap that up neatly because it isn't neat. What I'll say is this. I no longer arrange myself around her comfort as a reflex. I catch myself doing it sometimes, and I stop, and I ask whether it's something I genuinely want to give or something I'm giving out of fear. That's a new skill. It's uncomfortable. It's also the most honest I've been with her in years, and I think, slowly, imperfectly, she's beginning to understand that this version of me is more real than the one who cancelled Italy. Deirdre drove 40 minutes on bad knees and brought soup. That's the whole moral, if you want one. Pay attention to who shows up, and make sure at least some of the time that the person who shows up for you is you.